What if I told you that while Bob Dylan was transforming music history with revolutionary songwriting, some of the industry's most respected artists were quietly burning with resentment? We're not talking about casual artistic disagreements or routine creative differences. We're talking about decade-long rivalries, career-derailing comparisons, and deep personal grudges played out in studios, in interviews, and behind closed doors. Today we reveal the explosive, behind-the-scenes confrontations, insider testimonies, and even deliberate attempts at career sabotage that some claim unfolded in the shadow of Dylan's unprecedented influence on American culture. From Grammy snubs to Nobel controversies, these stories won't just change how you view folk music. They may change how you understand artistic rivalry itself. Phil Ochs, the conscience of a movement crushed by a towering shadow. Phil Ochs was the razor-sharp voice of protest, his political commitment absolute, his lyrics honed to challenge government policies and social injustice. For a time, he was the conscience of the folk movement. Then Bob Dylan arrived, and everything shifted. As Dylan moved away from overt protest writing, many activists felt personally abandoned. Folk club owner Izzy Young later claimed Ochs felt Dylan had sold out their shared mission in favor of mainstream success and artistic mystique. At a 56-9-1 Greenwich Village gathering, journalist Robert Shelton remembered bitter complaints. Serious activists were being ignored, while cryptic entertainers soaked up the spotlight. When Dylan went electric, headlines followed him. Ochs's own protest songs, thoroughly researched, calling for concrete action, were overshadowed by Dylan's abstract symbolism. Former manager Arthur Gorson insisted this was the ultimate betrayal of folk principles, proof, he argued, that Dylan never truly cared about social change, whether fair or not. Ochs watched his superior political knowledge get eclipsed by Dylan's myth, and it devastated him. Donovan, the British Dylan, who wanted his own name. Back from the moment Donovan emerged, critics labeled him the British Bob Dylan. Industry insiders say the comparison haunted his entire career. Even as he developed a unique sound, genuine Celtic mysticism, innovative arrangements, and beautiful psychedelic folk, journalists framed his success in relation to Dylan Chris. Welch recalled a 6691 interview where Donovan vented, "British interpretations of folk traditions were dismissed as derivative, while Dylan's American roots were never questioned." Former manager Ashley Kozak claimed Donovan would tear up magazine pieces that mentioned Dylan in reviews of his own work, feeling his individuality was being erased. Producer Mickey Most said Donovan became obsessed with proving his experimentals credentials, spending excessive studio time to demonstrate he wasn't a pale copy but an original artist. And yet, even when Donovan realized his original compositions stood on their own, the persistent comparisons drove him toward bitter frustration. According to multiple sources, jealousy took root when he understood that, in the press, his success would always be measured against a prototype, Dylan himself. Leonard Cohen, poet, novelist, and the Nobel's most gracious skeptic, Leonard Cohen, entered music as an established novelist and poet, a true man of letters. His sophisticated wordplay and philosophical depth should have made him the obvious choice for literary recognition. Instead, Dylan collected cultural thunder, culminating in the Nobel Prize in 6112. Publicly, Cohen was gracious, calling the decision like pinning a medal on Everest. Privately, multiple sources say the decision genuinely bothered him. Journalist Larry Sloman remembered Cohen in 5102 making subtle comments about the difference between actual poets and folk singers who write clever lines, remarks that later interviews clarified were digs at the blurry boundary critics drew between poetry and song. Former producer John Lasauer claimed Cohen studied Dylan's techniques obsessively, stream of consciousness lyrics being poured over in university courses, while Cohen's carefully crafted verses received far less scholarly attention. Close. Associates say Cohen quietly left the intellectual bun fight to others, but they insist his superior academic background was largely ignored while Dylan's laurels mounted. Cohen brought genuine literary credentials most songwriters could only dream of, yet history chose Dylan. The rivalry stayed polite, but the sting was real. Neil Young, building a new sound in the long Dylan shadow. Neil Young pioneered EOS, feedback-drenched, back-of-the-room guitar sound that would later shape grunge and alternative rock. His voice was distinctive, his writing emotionally honest, and his artistic identity entirely his own. But insiders say the rivalry began as soon as Dylan's electric transformation dominated the headlines, right through Young's Buffalo Springfield. Days and Beyond, guitarist Frank Pancho Sampedro claims Young would obsessively compare Dylan's sales and critical reception against his own album releases, keeping detailed charts. Music journalist Nick Kent remembered 5791 sessions where Young made pointed remarks about originators versus popularizers, subtle jabs at who gets the credit. Former manager Elliot Roberts allegedly scheduled Young's albums to compete directly, with Dylan's hoping to prove his songwriting was equally valuable to contemporary music. Yet historians kept positioning Dylan as the definitive folk rock architect, while Young was merely a major inspiration for younger artists. What truly frustrated Young, sources say, was not influence, but recognition, Dylan's status as primary innovator versus Young's as heir. Paul Simon, the perfectionist who couldn't understand the cult of rough edges, Paul Simon crafted songs with flawless production values, sophisticated harmonies, and meticulous arrangements. His technical precision and musical education should have crowned him the preeminent songwriter of his generation. Instead, Dylan's ragged demos and nasal delivery captivated audiences who preferred authenticity over polish. Music executive Clive Davis remembers a 6691 label meeting where Simon, expressing real frustration, asked why his superior technique was dismissed as commercial calculation, while Dylan's mumbling was considered more emotionally honest. Former producer Tom Wilson and former partner Art Garfunkel both claimed Simon studied Dylan's recording methods, trying to understand why listeners favored tapes with scuffs over his carefully orchestrated masterworks, as critics consistently praised Dylan's authenticity over Simon's polish. Jealousy reportedly grew. Former Columbia executive John Hammond Jr. added that Simon became obsessed with matching Dylan's album sales, demanding larger marketing budgets to compete head-to-head. To Simon, his clean vocal lines and perfectly delivered lyrics were assets. The culture treated them as liabilities. Joni Mitchell, the confessional visionary who refused to bow Joni. Mitchell revolutionized confessional songwriting with unprecedented emotional honesty, complex guitar tunings, jazz-inflected arrangements, and fearless personal lyricism. Instead of being firmly established as the definitive singer-songwriter, many critics continued to place Dylan above her in greatest lists, despite her innovations. Friends say, the bitterness began when critics ranked Dylan consistently above Mitchell, even as she collected evidence of his artistic limitations, repetitive chord progressions, and a limited vocal range. Former producer Henry Louis said Joni would rage in private about audiences applauding roughness over invention. Her manager, Peter Asher, allegedly noted she studied every Dylan biography she could find, building her case while continuing to create daring compositions. As her interviews grew bolder, the rivalry went public. Former producer Louis Henry reportedly said Mitchell would argue that some of Dylan's comments were completely out of context, and that no, this wasn't merely about being in Dylan or not in him. It was about a woman whose Equally profound contributions were often dismissed as feminine introspection, while Dylan's position as the ultimate musical poet stayed unchallenged. It wasn't just unfair, it was historically incomplete. Which rivalry shocked you most? Do you stand on the side of emotional authenticity, even when it's rough, or the side of flawless craft? Drop your thoughts in the comments, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Legends Uncovered.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.